All right, guys, so we have some massive updates here on Trump's unilateral and illegal economic war against literally the entire face of the planet. So we're going to start off here with a couple different clips of him doubling down on this unhinged policy. We have some market updates. We have some polling updates. There are mass protests with thousands of people taking place across the country. So we're going to get to all of that. Let's go ahead and start off here with Donald Trump on Air Force One explaining why he decided to tank the global economy and potentially plunge us into a recession.
Market has spoken when they look at the fact that we have $1 billion trade deficit. When you look at the trade deficit that we have with certain countries, way over $1 billion per country. But with China, it's $1 trillion. And we have to solve our trade deficit with China. We have $1 trillion trade deficit with China. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year we lose with China. And unless we solve that problem, I'm not going to make a deal. Now, I'm willing to deal with China, but they have to solve their surplus. We have a tremendous deficit problem with China. They have a surplus of at least $1 trillion a year. I think it's like $1.1 trillion. And I want that solved. And no other president's taken it on. I had to take it on the last time, and then we had a rigged election. No other president's taken it on. And so China is, they say the market's spoken. The market, China is right now taking a big hit because everyone knows we're right. They have to pay tariffs because otherwise we have a surplus, and they have a surplus with us that is not sustainable.
Okay, so there's a lot going on in that already. Number one, he still doesn't really seem to understand, or maybe he's just straight up lying at this point, what tariffs actually are, which are a tax on imported goods to the U.S., meaning that U.S. companies that are importing steel or a product that was made overseas or whatever the case may be, those U.S. companies are going to be the ones who are paying the tariffs, not China. China isn't going to pay those tariffs, right? So that's number one. Number two, he also doesn't seem to understand what a trade deficit is, right? Because it would be one thing if you're saying, okay, we want to bring back XYZ sectors in terms of domestic manufacturing here in the United States. And we can't really compete with China on a level playing field, and they're cooking us in that market. So we're going to impose tariffs on these specific products coming from these specific countries, while also making investments in that industry domestically here in the US. And you could do like a refined tariff strategy that makes sense and could actually work in the long run to bolster domestic manufacturing here, right? There is a way you could go about doing that. And he's specifically talking about China in this clip, but keep in mind, that's not what he's doing, okay? That's not what he's doing, right? He is imposing widespread tariffs. I think the average is like 30% on every single country on the face of the planet. Some countries that don't even have human beings living on them, like some islands that only have penguins. And keep in mind, the way that they're calculating these tariffs, initially they said, okay, we're going to do like reciprocal tariffs where whatever XYZ country is charging us, we are going to charge them the same thing in tariffs. That's the rate we're going to set. And then they released this plan, right? The whole list that he put forward with all of these countries on it. And the way they actually calculated it was essentially based on the trade deficit, right? Which is what he's talking about here. Now, in the same way that a tariff can be good, it can be bad, it can be useful, it can be hurtful, depends on how you do it, the same thing applies to a trade deficit. A trade deficit with a country is not necessarily good or bad, right? You could have a country that produces something that we can't or don't want to produce here in the United States, and if we're importing that product to the US and they just happen to not be buying as many US products as we're buying from them, then you get a trade deficit. But that doesn't mean that we're like getting screwed over or that country is sabotaging us or stealing from us or something like that. It just means we're buying some of their products, right? Now, again, that depends on exactly what industry, what country we're talking about. But the way that he's going about doing this is going to result in nothing in terms of increasing U.S. domestic manufacturing. If anything, it's going to do the opposite of that. And you're going to have, companies fleeing from doing business in the U.S. But it's also going to lead to skyrocketing inflation because, again, there are widespread tariffs on every single country across basically every single industry. So it's going to lead to skyrocketing inflation, a potential recession, meaning job losses, so higher unemployment at the same time. and it's not going to achieve the end goal of increasing domestic manufacturing. So it's the worst of all worlds that you could possibly imagine in terms of how he's handling this. Now, we move on. We got a second clip here, short little one on Air Force One. Let's go ahead and listen to Trump telling us that we need to take our medicine.
In the world,
Mr. President,
which is what it should be.
is there a Trump put though? Is there pain in the market at some point? You're unwilling to tolerate this idea of a Trump put. Is there a threshold?
I think your question is so stupid. I mean, I think it's I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something, and we have such a horrible. We have been treated so badly.
Okay, so he says that's a stupid question, and he says sometimes you have to take medicine. Now, he was reacting to how the stock markets have been going all over the place. I'll show you a little bit of that here in a second. But again, it's like, it would be one thing if you were making a selling pitch to the American people and you said, listen, things are going to be a little bit shaky for right now, but we have a concrete, stable, coherent, long-term plan. We're going to do these specific tariffs in these specific industries against these specific countries, and we're also going to back it with a 10-year, multi-trillion-dollar investment coming from the federal government to bolster these industries and to, ensure that we have good-paying union jobs and we can increase manufacturing here. That would be one thing. And I think the American people broadly would be like, yeah, okay, I'm somewhat okay with that, right? Let's do that. Maybe we'll have temporary economic pain, but let's bring these jobs back. We've had decades of neoliberalism and exporting jobs overseas and entire regions of the country that have been hollowed out and decimated. Like, that's something that people could rally behind. That's something that I would support to a large extent. But that's not what he's doing. That's just not what he's doing. So it's like, you can't tell people to take medicine when you're just giving them poison, right? It's one thing to say, let's accept short-term pain for long-term gain. It's another thing to say, let's do short-term pain for long-term pain as well. That's what he's doing here. Now, we continue. He also posted this over on his Truth Social account. He says, we have massive financial deficits with China, the European Union, and many others. The only way this problem can be cured is with tariffs, which are now bringing in tens of billions of dollars into the U.S. That's just not true. They are already in effect, and a beautiful thing to behold. The surplus with these countries has grown during the presidency of Sleepy Joe Biden. We are going to reverse it, and reverse it quickly. Someday people will realize that tariffs for the United States of America are a very beautiful thing. We also had this one, and this is just from a couple hours ago today. He says, and he invented an entirely new word here that I've never heard before. He says, the United States has a chance to do something that should have been done decades ago. Don't be weak. Don't be stupid. Don't be a panikin. A panikin, which he says is a new party based on weak and stupid people. Be strong, courageous, patient, and greatness will be the result. So we got a new word here being invented, a panikin, which I guess is anybody who's concerned about, potentially losing their job or having their Social Security disappear or their 401k disappear. Anybody who's concerned about that, you're just a panikin, right? Now, we also have here the Trump Secretary of Agriculture, who went on with Jake Tapper and was asked about the specific situation in regards to the tariffing of an island that is only inhabited by penguins. So let's go ahead and watch this clip here.
Example, President Trump laid out with a giant graphic of all the countries where tariffs were going to be, what he called reciprocal tariffs were going to be imposed. And you're imposing a 10% tariff on the herd in McDonald Islands. The herd in McDonald Islands have zero human inhabitants. They have zero exports. They have zero imports. They do have a lot of penguins. Why are you putting import tariffs on islands that are entirely populated by penguins?
Well, I mean, come on, Jake. Obviously, here's the bottom line. We live under a tariff regime from other countries. We have too long
the McDonald Islands is not imposing
the idea that America goes first. I mean, come on. Whatever. Listen, the people that are leading this are serious, intentional, patriotic, the smartest people I've ever worked with. I did not come up with the formulas. I'm the ag secretary. I studied agriculture at Texas A&M. I was in a lot of conversations to make sure our farmers and our ranchers were part of that. The president recognized the importance of inputs. We got potash and fertilizer to make sure they could do their planting. But I have no doubt that I speak on behalf of President Trump when he would say he has the utmost confidence in the team and what they have built and what.
Okay, so they're geniuses, they're perfect, they're patriotic, so just trust the process, I guess, right? Not exactly inspiring confidence here when you're responding to a question about the fact that you just tariffed an island that's only inhabited by penguins and has no imports or exports. Now, the other interesting aspect of this is that there is a line that she could have used here as sort of a deflection. And Jeff Stein made this point over on Breaking Points earlier today, and he's right. It's like what she could have said here is, well, we're tariffing this island because we don't want it to potentially be used as sort of like a stop-off point where then countries could skirt around the tariffs that we have on them and say, no, this product isn't coming from China, it's coming from the McDonald Island or whatever. And if we didn't have those tariffs in place, then they'd be able to do this workaround or whatever. She could have said something like that. It still wouldn't have made sense, right? And it wouldn't have been true in terms of why they decided to impose these, but she couldn't even come up with that. She just says, this is a silly question, right? And then trust the process. Now, moving on here in terms of the latest on the market. So today was kind of a bizarre day because initially the stocks plummeted, right? And it looked like we were heading for like a disastrous, Monday sort of like, or Black Monday situation. And then there was a rebound, right? And they sort of ended up coming close to breaking even today, maybe like a 1% to 2% drop off. But the reason that there was the crash and then an uptick, and this is a completely insane situation, guys, is that on Twitter earlier today, you had, and I believe this is the origin point, a verified account, like Walter Bloomberg or whatever, this verified account of a guy who's not really in any official position or capacity whatsoever, just a guy with a check mark on Twitter. And he posted what looks to be just a completely fabricated quote from a top Trump administration official, where the quote was basically saying Trump is considering implementing a 90-day pause on these tariffs. So then the markets reacted to that and they started shooting back up. And then it turns out this is just completely made up. It wasn't a real quote. And here we had the Trump administration, according to Forbes, calling it fake news, right? So a random guy on Twitter, it looks like, with a checkmark by his name, was able to shift trillions of dollars in the market, just like that, just by posting a bullshit quote online. Absolutely insane. Now, we'll have to see what happens over the next couple of days. I mean, typically, I'm not a big stock owner. I don't really, in terms of how this materially impacts the day-to-day lives of average working class Americans. We know the concentration of stock ownership in the top 10%, the top 1% in this country, but this is going to have a massive impact on average working class Americans because the way that our system is set up is that when there is Wall Street panic, when you have these businesses freaking out and they start to lose this value in their company, they're not going to eat that on their end, right? They're going to pass that on to their workers. So you're going to have layoffs or you're going to have cutbacks that are going to screw over thousands and thousands of Americans. We've already seen at this point thousands of Americans fired already on the anticipation of what kind of economic fallout is going to happen as a result of this. And also important to remind ourselves that it's not just the tariffs, right? You also have Doge and Elon and Trump on the back end who are slashing social programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, entire agencies like the National Labor Relations Board and OSHA and all of these other organizations in the federal government. The CFPB is another one. So not only are you potentially going to essentially implement the largest regressive tax increase on average working class Americans, but at the same time, you're potentially going to spike unemployment, and at the same time, you're slashing social programs. That could be some sort of a safety net. So again, the worst of all worlds is what Trump is designing here. Now, in the meantime, as all of this is going on, Trump was out golfing. He participated in his own golf tournament, which surprisingly he won. Okay. So he won his own golf tournament as everybody was freaking the fuck out and the entire world was panicking over what he had just announced. So I guess congratulations on the win there. We have David Sirota here as well, who I think had a good response over on MSNBC where he breaks down just how stupid this policy actually is and maybe, what could happen in a world where tariffs were being used for a positive. So let's go ahead and watch this clip.
If you were to take what Donald Trump has said at face value, which I would not advise, but let's say you do. He said that he's doing this because he wants to bring the trade deficit down that we have with China and the European Union. He's gone on to say that this is the only way to do it. And every economist, everyone who follows this that I have spoken to says that is not true. It is not the only way to reduce a trade deficit with another trading partner.
That's 100% true, that it is not the only way. And I would say this, Donald Trump has tapped into an issue that has real resonance in the country, and understandably so, since NAFTA, since the deindustrialization of this country. But what he has put forward is a completely destructive way to deal with the problems of deindustrialization. There is a strong case to be made that a tariff is like a hammer. A hammer can be used to build a house. A hammer can be used to build all sorts of things. It can also be used to destroy a lot of things if you use a hammer in a destructive way. And so what he's done is he's put forward a set of tariffs that are not well thought out. They're not strategic. They're much different than what the Biden administration did. The Biden administration used tariffs strategically to protect and help build certain industries that was part of a larger industrial policy, and it boosted manufacturing and factory production, factory construction in this country. What Donald Trump has done is not that. Donald Trump has put forward these tariffs as a kind of power grab so that countries and corporations have to come to him, kiss the ring, ask for exemptions. We saw that when Trump was in his first term, and donors, by the way, got more of those exemptions. So this is not really a trade policy at all. This is a destructive kind of power grab.
He's exactly 100% correct. This is really the only way that you could possibly make sense in terms of trying to interpret what Trump is actually doing here, because there is no economic lens where you can analyze this from a left-wing, a right-wing perspective, a centrist perspective, whatever, and make sense of it, right? There are some people on the right who are claiming, oh, this is all just like 5D chess and he's trying to negotiate or use this as a negotiating leverage with other countries to get them to lower their tariffs. But it's like, okay, if that's the case, then number one, why is he saying that it's not and that this is a long-term strategy? And number two, why is he tariffing countries that have basically no tariffs on the US? Number three, why is he tariffing so much higher, and these are not reciprocal tariffs, but much higher than the tariffs that some countries have on us? And number four, why is he not making it clear what his actual demands are with any of these countries? So like that argument doesn't make sense. And again, as David is pointing out here, it also doesn't make sense if you're saying, no, this actually is a long-term strategy, and this is how we're going to, bolster domestic manufacturing in the long term, because he doesn't have the industrial policy. He doesn't have the investments to incentivize that. So it's not going to do that. Again, all this is going to end up doing is breaking the economy, plunging us into a recession, spiking unemployment, and spiking inflation. So, like, if that's the goal, then I guess he's succeeding on it. But again, the other lens through this is that it's just a power grab, that he wants corporations and lobbyists and entire countries to come begging on their hands and knees, right? And he loves that shit. He eats that shit up. So we move on. Again, a good point here, as I was saying earlier in the video from Derek Thompson. He says it's one thing to ask Americans to accept broad pain in terms of equities, growth, and employment for narrow gain in manufacturing. But for now, Trump's tariff gambit isn't broad pain for narrow gain. It's just pain for pain. Here's the Michigan auto business freaking out. And I'll link this down below if you guys want to go read the entirety of it. But essentially, you have a business owner here who's saying there is literally no way for the business to survive with the additions of these tariffs, because so many of their products come from countries like China, just even small component parts of a car that could be manufactured here in the US, but because some of the brackets and the bolts and whatever else are made overseas, those are all getting slapped with the tariff. And so the price of a car is going to be going up by thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, which means less people are probably going to buy cars, which means they're probably going to end up firing a bunch of people who work at this place. So it's like, okay, this is the kind of thing that we can expect, which is the precise opposite of increasing domestic manufacturing. Now, At the same time, over the last couple of days, we've had mass protests. I've seen some estimations of 600,000 people who RSVP'd for these. I've seen estimations in the millions, but either way, I think from the videos that I've seen in the pictures that there have been millions of people across the country in basically every major and even semi-major city. All over the country, people taking to the streets. These are being called the hands-off protest. There are a bunch of different reasons that we'll get to here in a second from Ken Klippenstein in terms of why people were showing up to these protests. You can see some of the signs here. Smash fascism, end the oligarchy, axis of evil with, I think, Elon and Trump and somebody else in the back there. You have Doge as a fascist Republican Ponzi scheme. You have a guy with a sign here saying, born 1929, I vote, deport Elon. You have some more here in Virginia, people protesting, some more pictures and stuff here just for some context and everything. So mass protests taking place across the country in terms of what people are actually out there for. Credit to Ken Klippenstein for getting some of these testimonies here. It was a very diverse group of people. It seems like this really was a catch-all kind of protest. You had this guy who was saying Luigi was very right, not just right, but very right. He said Luigi was very right when he talks about the parasites that are within society. They are not at the bottom. They are those at the top, those that take and take and take from the rest of the people while giving very little back. So shout out to Luigi there, who, by the way, the Trump administration is now trying to get the death penalty for. We have another person saying Congress is doing nothing. So this person broadly angry about both Democrats and Republicans in terms of not resisting what Trump is doing, what Elon is doing right now. Another protester here who is more specifically calling out Democrats, saying that there's no spine, and this is why people are falling off from supporting Democrats, is because they're not fighting back hard enough. Another person asked, is this America? We have to fight harder, get rid of them. It's rough, etc., etc. I'll link this down below if you want to go read the entirety of it. But, again, very diverse reasons for people being out there. It wasn't just sort of like a, liberal anti-Trump kind of thing. There was, a lot of people who were taking to the streets. I even saw some protests that were sort of going on tangentially to that were specifically about Gaza, and many people showing up to those as well. Now, in terms of the polling data here, on how Trump is doing. This is an Ipsos poll from April 2nd. On immigration, he's still a net positive at +4. By the way, either later today or tomorrow, I'm going to have an update video on some of the deportations, or really, I don't even know what a better word for it would be. Not deportations, but the foreign imprisonment in El Salvador torture dungeon that Trump was engaging in. Some court battles going on there, some updates on some of the stories of people who have been thrown into that dungeon, and it's very, very bleak stuff, to say the least. So immigration, somehow Trump is still +4. On the rest of this, he's in the negative. He's in the hole over here. So on corruption, -10, on employment, -13, on the economy, -15, foreign policy, -16, and international trade, which is topic of this video, is his weakest issue, -18. We also had some interesting polling data here that I won't play through the entirety of it, but here from Harry Enton over on CNN. First poll was in terms of who opposes the new tariffs on other countries. In terms of all goods, you had 56% Americans opposing it. And then specifically on the auto industry, you had 56% opposing it. In terms of who thinks, or how many people think that there's going to be short-term raising prices due to these tariffs overall in the country, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, you had 72% who think that the tariffs are going to cause prices to go up. And that includes 64% of GOP voters. And then down here at the bottom, you can see just 5% overall think that tariffs will lower prices in the short term, which, yeah, they are not going to lower prices. They are definitely going to spike prices, because that's kind of how tariffs work definitionally. So I'll leave you guys off with that. This is a disaster. There's no other way to put it, guys. This is going to cause serious economic pain for millions and millions of people, both in the United States as well as around the world. And again, it's like, for what exactly? For what? What is the end goal of this? Because you're not pushing forward with a coherent strategy to actually onshore jobs. If anything, you're doing the opposite of that. You're ripping up the CHIPS Act. You're pushing back against some of the investments that were made under the Biden administration. So there is no long-term coherent strategy. It's just economic pain, short-term pain for long-term pain. And you have Trump just sort of like delusionally pushing forward with this.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him.
Everyone is saying